I was a good kid, tried not to lie much, but there are some things you don't tell mom and dad. Actually, that'd be a good one to play you next, is a song about my sister. Do you want me to do that?
Please do.
Yeah, okay, so this is called How Does Your Sister Rollerskate? It's kind of complicated to explain that prank it's a cruel prank that teenage boys do. But, so I took that as a title of this song. Let's see, I think this, no, it's not with a capo. Here we go. Tell me, how does your sister roller skate? It's a cruel trick teenage boys play on the weak. When you ask, the answer is she's got no legs and they kick your ass. So let me tell you how my sister roller skates. Well, she was born in a thunderstorm on my grandma's couch in rural Arkansas. She almost died before the doctor arrived. It was a painful and difficult birth. She walked with braces and sometimes crutches for the first part of her life. So let me tell you how my sister roller skates. Tell me, how does your sister roller skate? Well, my sister roller skates just fine. She's got a job, a family, and she drives. She won an employment discrimination lawsuit. She wrote a book about her life. Tell me, how does your sister roller skate? It was a less enlightened time, and she was harassed all of the time. They called her retard, a spastic, right to her face, and they were generally cruel and unkind. Me and my sisters, we tried to defend her, but nothing ever seemed to change until our neighbor Victor broke somebody's nose. Tell me, how does your sister roller skate? It's a cruel trick teenage boys play on the weak. Well, my sister roller skates just fine, and you can't let them ruin your life. Tell me, how does your sister roller skate? All right.
David Lowery in
I
Studio
sent
B.
that song to my sister, and we communicate a lot by iPad. It's a lot easier for her than the phone. And I sent it to her, and just great thing about iMessage, you can put a whole full multimedia file in the message. So I sent it to her. It goes, "Hey, I wrote a song about you," and I sent it to her, and I could tell she read the message. And then there sort of started a response, but then nothing else. And then a really long time went by. I was like, what? Did I insult her? Stuff. And then she writes back, just pretty good. Not thank you so much, or you got my story right. It was just that's all she said was pretty good. So anyway, you try to.
Are any other reactions from other family members about the content here?
Well, it's not just family, so it's it's just kind of warts and all and stuff like that. There's a song, there's a tragedy at kind of the heart of my family, not even that one, my dad's family, my dad's brother, murder. And so I tell the story of that in the song Piney Woods. And that's the one that my sisters and my cousins. It was like, I'm so glad that somebody sort of finally told that story, because it's a very weird story and it affects everybody's life downstream from there. So that was, I think that had its effect. But, it's also about the people that I played in bands with, like the original manager from Camper Van Beethoven and Cracker was in our lives for a long time. It's a very big part of our lives. Like, I get to throw him in a couple of the songs. Like I said, I get to talk. I haven't played that yet. Camper Van Beethoven, the name of the band is actually the band name. The band was one of the guys I co-founded the band with is this guy, David McDaniel, and he actually named the band, but he's only in the band for 3 months. But he wrote a couple of the songs on the first record and he was sort of instrumental in the vibe of the band, Camper Van Beethoven. But he had a really interesting life, despite the fact that he left the band. He actually had a calling from God, and he became a missionary and went around the world. And I don't know what good deeds he did. I imagine he did a lot of good ones. I say he built an orphanage. I don't know if that's actually the case or something like that in the song. But one of the songs I tell the story of the day I wrote "Take the Skinheads Bowling," but it's just kind of an excuse to sort of explain who David McDaniel is. So that would probably. Want me to play another one?
Well, before we run out of time, I would love to ask you about your teaching. Are you still teaching?
I am. I teach at the University of Georgia, and I teach the business of the music business. So I do like licensing, publishing, the economics and finance parts and stuff like that.
And that's ongoing? That's
ongoing, yes. Every semester. I actually teach 4 classes now. So.
Now, are you calling California home?
No, I live in Athens, Georgia.
In Athens, all right.
140 miles away from here, so.
Yeah, that's not all that far.
Yeah.
You can almost hear WNCW. It can get to Commerce, and I think that's where our signal fades out.
Yeah. You're up in the mountains, so it goes pretty far. But okay, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your advocacy for rights for artists and creatives and what your take is on how creatives and artists can navigate the age of AI.
Well, so far I haven't really heard any music that is AI generated that you can't tell is AI generated. Now, there's 2 things about AI, and I wish people... I think, I wish like the conversation was a little better, because there's kind of 2 broad kinds of AI. Like, I went and got, like, when you're 60, they're like, oh, you got to have a heart scan or whatever, you got to get a calcium score. I went and got one of those, and it spit out immediately a report that was done by AI. And then later a doctor came in and looked at it and said, this is what's going on. You're healthy. Everything's good, right? That's the good kind of AI. You know what I mean? Kind that's going to invent new drugs and read our x-rays and catch things that the doctor's not going to catch and stuff like that. And then there's generative AI, which basically is just kind of the slop, the funny memes. Oh, let's do a baby podcasting, that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's really earth-changing or earth-shattering. I think we could, and that's the kind of AI that needs to sort of massively violate people's copyrights and rights of publicity and stuff like that. So one thing I want to point out to people is we can have all the good stuff of AI without essentially just completely destroying our creative class here, because that's not really the life-changing stuff. We're not going to collapse the civilization if we don't be able to do baby podcasting memes. So I just wish the argument was fleshed out a little more honestly and stuff. So that's the discussion was sort of laid out a little more honestly, right?
Yeah, you've talked about how you envision that if it was a voluntary kind of agreement between creatives and the entities that are AI, that if people could come to terms and voluntarily say something to the effect of, okay, well, you can take my material and generate it in whatever new way, except I'm in on the deal.
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about it being licensed, and there is licensed AI. There's AI that will make music that actually is licensed. It's just the biggest companies are not licensed, and they don't want a license, and they want an exception from copyright, and they don't want to pay people. People are like, well, how would you determine who to pay and what to pay? Well, there's actually a lot of the music economy where music is licensed, but you're not necessarily keeping track of every song that's getting paid, and you do it on a statistical or an inferential basis and stuff like that. Like radio for a long time before there was the internet, most radio stations couldn't really report what they were playing on a minute by minute basis, and that's always been, those royalties are paid out on sort of a statistical basis using some inferential methods, right? And that same thing could be applied to AI. And to their credit, there is at least one AI player, big AI player, that has basically kind of quietly asked, like me and some of the other artists, like, how would that work, right? So at least people are thinking about it. Right?
On your website, davidlowerymusic.com, you've got a link to the Tricordist website, which has a lot of helpful information.
Yeah, that's my public policy website, yeah, so, but for music.